It's a record no one wanted to see broken again, and yet only 15 months since the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando became the deadliest mass shooting in modern-day U.S. history, here we are again, mourning dozens of people who were killed when a 64-year-old man fired into a crowd of 20,000-plus people. One of the victims is Tewksbury, Massachusetts' Rhonda LaRocque, who was at the concert with her family. Her 6-year-old daughter, her husband, and her father-in-law survived. More than 500 others were injured, both by the shots fired and the crowd stampeding to get away. We
just thought we were going to die. There's no other thing. I thought the shooting would never end. It was the worst night of my life.
People are just like climbing all over the fences trying to get out. And people are just screaming again, and then you just hear pop, 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 pop. It was like, it sounded like 50-plus rounds were just going off.
At least 19 weapons and hundreds of rounds of ammunition were found in the gunman's room on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. Among them, according to the New York Times, were AR-15 style assault rifles.
We're angry, we're grieving, we're confused. People are hurting. It was a cowardly, despicable act that I'm very angry about. There's not much we can do, but we can learn.
But learn what exactly? Officials have identified the gunman as Stephen Paddock, who they say killed himself after the shooting. And investigators say there's no immediate evidence connecting Paddock to an international terror organization, despite ISIS claiming responsibility. This morning, Donald Trump addressed the nation with a message of unity following last night's attack.
In moments of tragedy and horror, America comes together as one, and it always has.
And indeed it is, with three types of tweets flooding our feeds today. Thoughts and prayers from members of Congress, responses from those furious with the tweets of thoughts and prayers alone, and demands for real action from people like Congressman Seth Moulton, who declared today, thinking of everyone in Las Vegas and praying Congress will have the courage to do more than stand in silence to commemorate them. Based on recent congressional history, it seems unlikely. So what has caused this type of paralysis in D.C., and is there a way to break it? Joining me to discuss are Michael Curry. Michael's the former president of the Boston NAACP, current chair of the National NAACP Advocacy and Policy Committee. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Boston Globe Ideas editor, Dante Ramos. Good to see you, Dante. And Michael Astrue is former Social Security Commissioner under Presidents George W. Bush and later Barack Obama. Good to see you, too, Mike. I woke up this morning, and after I concluded nothing is going to be done about guns in the wake of this thing, and I really don't want to debate gun control tonight, but nothing's going to be done about climate change, about gun violence in general, tension between police and blacks, immigration, the list. What has caused this across-the-board paralysis in our government, in our country?
Yeah, I think one is an ideological divide that just has grown over the years. And
why? Why has it grown over the years?
It's grown over the years because I think people are entrenched in their view on many of the issues you just talked about. And people are trying to, we often say that they would argue the ends to win the middle. But people are just staying in the ends, and they're not working towards solutions. So we're seeing that play out in health care and climate change, and quite frankly, in criminal justice reform as well.
What do you think it is? In part, it's the media that people choose. I think we have to, I don't know if we plead guilty or just plead acknowledgement. There's a much greater trend to go to the media that agrees with your worldview, which doesn't crack your mind open. That's part of the problem, is it not?
I think it's a huge part of the problem. As Michael was just saying, the way politics is now approached is a matter of base activation. And that is something that politicians do to their constituents. It's also something that, ideologically oriented news sources do for their readers. And I think Facebook and Twitter are huge culprits here, especially Facebook, in terms of showing people selectively what they think they're going to like.
You're a bit of a political historian. Is this aberrational, the last 10? And by the way, it's not just the Trump era. It's been going on for a while. I don't want this to be a Trump brashing evening. Is anything like this happened before where literally nothing gets done?
No, I think what we're seeing here is unique. And I think the political culture in Washington is broken. And the dilemma is you have extremes but no middle among our political leaders. The people there's a big middle. And what that means is we've got to figure out a way to get the politicians responding to the people in the middle. And that means sweating the details, which they don't want to do. We've become a culture that likes the fast, easy solution.
It seems to me it also means compromise. And one of my favorite lines from Barack Obama, I'm not sure his original, is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I mean, the reality is everybody has their ideologically pure positions. And it seems to me, and I don't know why this is either, that the unwillingness to compromise on those, not as a matter of principle, but as I don't even know what as a matter of what, that's greater than I remember it having been, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's right. And you look at the failures in healthcare, the failures in immigration, even the failures on gun control. And, you know, I was almost done with my term when Sandy Hook came. And no one had said one word to me about gun control in almost 6 years. And then all of a sudden I'm on a White House working group on this. But the problem is everybody wanted something fast and easy. And what they did, one of the things they did with us is they wanted to take certain categories of people on disability and disqualify them for guns. And it fit so badly what the real goal was that the left came in and opposed those rules. And
were they wrong to oppose those rules?
No, they were right to oppose those rules. But the problem is that then everybody forgot. Nobody said, okay, the Social Security database won't work. How do we get one that works? The DOJ database that's supposed to identify people with violent crimes, people with domestic violence, that database stinks too. But then the moment passes and no one stays focused on the issues and does the hard work in the details to at least get incremental improvement.
You know, speaking of the moment passing, Sarah Huckabee Sanders today was asked about the NRA, and she did what a lot of people do when they don't want to do it. I mean, Scott Pruitt did it after Irma. He's the head of the EPA. Here's a little bit of Huckabee Sanders.
I think we need to remember the only person with blood on their hands is that of the shooter, and this isn't a time for us to go after individuals or organizations. I think that we can have those policy conversations, but today is not that day.
It's never that day. And, you know, with all due respect to what you said a minute ago about quick solutions, even if quick solutions are not the answer, it seems to me if you don't dive in when the country's attention is focused on an issue, I don't care what it is, the killing of a young man by a cop, you know, evidence that people can't afford their health care premiums, so they're not even going to die. Those are the moments to do these kinds of things, are they not?
I would agree completely. I think the NRA, look, a lot of things are wrong in Washington. The NRA is the distillation of an organization that has figured out how the system works and has managed to sort of pick the lock and get its own preferences time and time again, despite the fact that on a host of particulars of different types of legislation, the public overwhelmingly disagrees with,
including their own membership.
Correct.
You know, one last thing. My thesis for tonight was if we diagnose the problem, maybe we can prescribe a cure. Maybe that's naive. One last thing to add to this list. The Supreme Court is looking at a case about gerrymandering, about these creative creations of districts. They've already ruled on racial gerrymandering. Now they're looking at political gerrymandering. If they don't decide that political gerrymandering is unconstitutional, it seems to me that we never fix this thing, because essentially gerrymandering is a prescription for running to the extremes to reach your base. You're nodding in agreement.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think the gerrymandering decision could have an impact. I think it's the money in politics. To the NRA point, I think Citizens United, we have a major crisis in this country where if you're an elected official, Republican or Democrat, and you want to do the right thing, there's a threat that comes from the big money that says if you do what is not in our best interest, you will get taken out of office.
So cure the paralysis. Citizens, within passing the laugh test, if we possibly can, Citizens United is not about to be repealed by a Supreme Court that is leaning conservative and probably be more conservative at the end of Donald Trump's term. What are the kinds of things that can be done? Are there things, or do we just have to live in this perpetual state of paralysis?
Yeah, I think one is misinformation. I think it's consciousness raising. We don't do a good job of understanding how the whole system works, right? And then we also got to get people out of their entrenched ideology.
Because it is a pogo-esque problem. The enemy is us to a degree. We choose to, apparently, we have found a comfort zone, as I discussed with Dante a minute ago, in our own little thing with the ideas that are, that we share, yes?
I think it's a goal of reaching people. And if you say that there's a bill pending now, we were just talking about it, that would remove the restrictions on silencers, right? And we can imagine a mass shooting.
It's pending, it's a hearing scheduled.
Where they don't even know where the shots are coming from. that's common sense that we should fight that. But unfortunately, we get entrenched on the Second Amendment right thing, and people sort of say, oh, I want to defend the Second Amendment. That's just not silly.
You know, the problem, the silencer issue is an important issue, and there's also this reciprocity in terms of gun laws thing that's before Congress. The ability of the American people, it seems to me, to stop a horrible idea is still there. For example, cutting 24 million people off health care. They were able to stop that. But there seems to be no ability to advance an affirmative solution to anything. So is there a way to break that logjam or no?
I think we're in a period, and Michael was sort of alluding to this, where we're in an unusual period of dysfunction. I think our institutions have not really caught up with various changes in our society, the way that we get information, the way that we deal with one another politically, and so those things are out of sync. I think it's a longer-term period of adjustment for those things to get back in sync, and for new political norms, new congressional norms to evolve in a way that makes it possible to do productive legislation again. But I think it's a longer-term adjustment. I don't see an easy solution.
And in that period, we could live with an occasional exception to perpetual gridlock. I mean, that's not a ridiculous conclusion, is it?
No, I mean, there might be occasional things that come along, but I think it would take a lot to really clear out the stable.
You know, my radio co-host, you know quite well, Marjorie Egan, would say the solution to all this is term limits. Is the only way people become less dependent on money. They actually get to vote their conscience occasionally. Is that part of the solution?
I at one point thought so. I don't think so anymore.
Why not?
I think it's a simplistic solution, and you do lose expertise. And you get unintended consequences. A lot of
the lobbyists running Congress even more than they do
already. A lot of the bad behavior in Congress is an unintended effect of the Watergate reforms of the 70s, and it took a long time for that to catch up. So I don't think that's the answer.
So what is the logjam breaker, Mike Astrue? Do you have one?
Well, I think the answer is I'll be a little contrarian here. I think Americans are somewhat pro-gridlock. They don't want to veer very far to the right or the left in any one direction, and all the politicians are clamoring for us to do that. And if we're going to make any kind of real progress, even if it's not going to be fully satisfactory to people, we've got to start looking at ways to move incrementally in the right direction.
Well, would background checks be an incremental thing on gun control? They would be.
Yeah.
What would be an incremental thing on health care?
But see, the databases have to work. I mean, the background checks don't do any good if the data that you're running and the data stinks.
Okay, so pick an incremental change. Pick an incremental change on any one of the things where I mentioned there was gridlock before, and tell me that is the one that could break it. What is it?
I think that we should sit down and have the Department of Justice come up with a much better database with states required to contribute accurate data to it so that we know who's committed a crime with a gun, who's beaten up a domestic partner, and a list of things like that. Right now, we just don't have it.
And if we had that data, you think fax data would convince the anti-gun control people that they should act? Don't 20 dead kids in Connecticut and 58 dead people so far in Las Vegas convince them?
I don't remember where the ACLU came in against the disability regulations on the gun control.
But what I guess I'm saying is
a lot of liberal groups did. If that had been done properly, they would have stepped back.
But it seems to me, I guess what I'm saying is that one of the worst parts, and we maybe should have said this earlier, maybe we intimated it, is Washington seems to be fact immune, for lack of a better expression. When Donald Trump can get up and say, I'm not going to benefit from this tax plan, and the next day the New York Times says, other than the $1 billion that he'd benefit, he's not going to benefit. It's sort of evidence that...
Our Congress, to put it another way, it's made up of golden retrievers. And what we really need are bulldogs, or terriers. We need people that are going to stick with issues over a long period of time and sweat the details. And we have a good model, historically, in the state, which is Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch. Now, those are two guys really far apart on most things. But they became close personally. They found ways to identify common ground. It was never what either of them ideally wanted, but they passed more significant legislation than any other combination of senators.
I saw it firsthand when I worked in Washington. You couldn't be more right. You need better people. Nice to see you, Michael Curry. Dante, good to see you. Michael, thank you so much for your time.